My name is David Carpenter. I was a Marine for 7 years and I joined the Marines in 1949.
Which unit were you with?
My first unit was 4-1 Commando. I did a 12-month training in Deal, Lympstone, Bickley. Commando training was completed in Bickley.
So, David, just before we get onto your commando life and everything else, just tell me a bit about where you're from. What your family was like. What was the Second World War like for you? What was your education like?
Well, I was educated at Filton Avenue, but my father ran an ambulance station in Feeder Road, and we lived on the ambulance station. But during the war, we were bombed out of there, and my sister and I were evacuated to Exeter. My elder brother was in the Royal Artillery in Libya. My second brother, Cyril, was in the Fleet Air Arm in the Pacific on the Implacable carrier. So the family were all spread up. My father was in the RAMC and he was stationed in Scotland running a military hospital. And my mother lived in Bristol and she worked for the BAC. So the whole family were spread out all over the world. My sister and I were also bombed out of Exeter, and my sister was buried under a load of rubble in one of these standing table shelters. My mother came down and she got rescued and took back home. I was evacuated eventually to Buckland Brewer, a village in Devon, near 6 miles from Bideford. I was there, I enjoyed that because I was haymaking and milking the cows and things like that. Then the hostilities came to an end and I came back to Bristol.
How old were you when you were evacuated?
Oh, about 2 years. I went to several places in Exeter because we were bombed out of one, and I went to several others, and I eventually finished up in Buckland Brewer. Bowden Farm it was called, in Buckland Brewer.
Do you remember being bombed?
Oh yes. Well, we were in Anderson shelter in Feeder Road. There was a brick wall between the Anderson shelter and the house. But we had lots of incendiaries on the house. The roof caught fire, but it didn't burn out. The fires were put out. My grandfather was a warden on Jones's store in Bristol, and I got a written account in there of the raid on Bristol, November the 24th, and he narrated this raid to my father, who's written it all down, and I've got it in there. And my grandfather went on, and he was still working at 90 for the Bristol Royal Infirmary. And when my father retired, my grandfather had to ask for a day off to go to his retirement party. And he got presented with a silver tankard by the Bristol Royal Infirmary. Anyway, he died. He went to work one day, came home, wasn't very well, and he passed away in Ham Green Hospital. But the family all got back together, and Mum rented a house in Filton Avenue, 173 Filton Avenue. And we lived there for 30 years. My elder brother lived in Bristol for a while, and he got married and moved to Essex. My other brother, he joined the Royal Marine Reserves, Cyril, and became a sergeant in the small boat section. But he died a couple of months ago. My elder brother died about 10 years ago. So there's only me and my sister left.
Yeah. What was obviously when you're up sticks and moving around all over the place, what was your education like?
Well, I went to Filton Avenue when I came home. I finished my education there. I left school at 14. But prior to that, when I was evacuated, I went to about 6 different schools. Exeter, that were evacuated to on the farm. So my education was a bit scarce.
Yeah. Did you ever get taught geography? Did you have any sense of the world and where you might end up? I mean, in terms of career and what have you?
No, not a lot, no. I didn't know where Korea was in those days.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you had quite a military family, but so was that a natural calling to become, to want to join the commando, the Marines?
Well, no, I was due to go in national service. No, I didn't want to go in the Army or the RAF. I wanted to go in the Navy, basically. So I went down to Victoria Street where the Royal Naval Recruiting Office was. And I said, can I join the Navy? They said, not for 2 years. If you're in the Navy or the Marines, you've got to join for 7 because there's 2 years training, especially in the Marines, you know. So I said, okay. And I thought, I'll go in the Marines. I did all these exercises, make sure I was fit. And I wore glasses. I took my glasses off. I never wore them after that in the Marines till I came out. So I went back, told my mother I joined the Marines for 7 years, and she wasn't very pleased.
Yeah. This is in 1949, yeah?
Yes,
And how old were you?
18.
And, okay, so, I mean, yeah, like, you know, you did a few press-ups and a few pull-ups
Yes.
in preparation, but what was it like becoming some of the training? Tell me about any standout memories for you in the you know, while you were preparing to become a Marine.
Well, no, I wasn't long after I was drafted into the Marines, and I went to Deal in Kent, not Deal, I tell a lie. Stonehouse Barracks in Plymouth was my home port, and I spent 3 months there drilling, discipline, and things like that. You know, parade stuff. Then after that,
Did you enjoy it?
oh yes, well, you know, no, I did enjoy it. Yeah, got me up early. And 3 months square bashing, as I pointed out, and then we went to Lympstone in
Dorset.
near Exmouth, infantry training camp.
Yeah.
And I did 3 months infantry training, climbing walls and going on Woodbury Common, doing exercises with live firing and things like that, you know, all to do with infantry training. 3 months of that.
Any memories? Any standout memories?
No, there was a fitness place on the side of the River Exe, and we had to do water training there. Oh, it was hard work, going through underwater tunnels and climbing these ropes, getting up, and you had to do it. If you didn't pass all these examinations, you were back squadded. I was in 561 squad. And if you didn't pass any of the tests, you were back squadded to 562 squad, and you had to do it all over again.
Did you get back squadded?
No. Oh no, I'm determined I'm not going to get back squadded. It was hard work, but I enjoyed it, you know.
Yeah.
Nice runs in Exmouth and Exeter. I used to go on leave weekends. I used to ride my bike to the station and get the train back to Bristol weekends and get back on my bike again and ride from Exeter to Lympstone, 4 o'clock in the morning, back to camp.
Wonderful.
Anyway, after those 3 months, I was sent to the hardest part of my training. That was Bickley in Plymouth, just outside Plymouth. Commando training. That was horrendous. And there again, if you didn't pass all the tests, you were back squadded, you know. In fact, sometimes some guys fell out and they were thrown out the Marines. They weren't fit enough to be a Marine, you know. That happened a lot of time in my 561 squad. Some were just thrown out. But a lot were back squadded.
When you say it was much harder, I mean, just tell me some of the training that you're doing there. What was the, you know, because Lympstone's synonymous with difficult.
Well, cliff climbing, abseiling, crossing rivers on ropes, you know. And we did 9-mile speed marches. And we had to do a 30-mile trek across Dartmoor with a 70-pound pack on our back. All we had was a map and a compass, and we were told to get to Oakhampton, across the moors. We had to go to several checkpoints on the way we had to get to. Then when you got to this checkpoint, they would give you a grid reference to carry on, you know, with your compass and everything. So that was hard work.
Were you developing a specialism at this point, or are you assigned a specialism after you've passed?
After I passed, yeah. Well, eventually I did make it for Bickley. I did pass everything. Then we were awarded our green berries.
What was that like?
That was wonderful. Get your green berry. Oh, yeah, proudest moment of my life. And we became the King Squad. So we passed out as a King Squad at Bickley with our green berries.
And what year? So this is 1951 now, is it?
Coming up, yes. And then I was going to be stationed to Malaya to fight the terrorists in Malaya. And I went on the troop ship, about 200 Marines, I suppose. All the rest were Pongos, the soldiers. And we left on the Empire Pride. And we got as far as Colombo on the Empire Pride. And I remember his name, Captain Chamberlain. He paraded the Marines on the deck of the Empire Pride. And he said, I've got 30 volunteers here who are going to stay on the ship and go to Korea. And he read the names out in alphabetical order. Marine Carpenter. So I didn't get to Malaya. We got to Singapore and all the rest of the troops got off. The rest of the Marines got off to go to 4-5 Commando to serve in Malaya. And I had a friend in 4-5 Commando. He was expecting me to join him, you know, but I never got there. And we went on to Curie. We landed at Curie, went ashore, and we were stationed in Australian barracks in Curie. And we were issued with American uniforms. All we kept was our green beret. All the rest was American khaki uniforms, you know. And Park issued us with cold weather clothing, parkas and things like that. Mm. And all our weapons had to be changed. Instead of 3-inch, I was in the heavy weapons section then. I volunteered for that. Captain Thomas was our commander. And we had to retrain on 81mm mortars instead of 3-inch mortars. And we had Garand rifles instead of .303 rifles. And the Garand rifles were quite good because they held 20 rounds and you could fire them straight off. And with the .303, you had a bolt action, didn't you? So we had to train with those and different machine guns, water-cooled machine guns instead of air-cooled, light machine guns, burp guns instead of Sten guns. So we had a couple of months training with all these weapons in Curie. After some training in Curie, they sent us up on to Camp McGill in Japan. And that was an American camp, the home of the 7th Cavalry, that was. And yeah, it was quite nice there. They're nice PX. That's their NAFI, the PX. And they had plenty of food, buy anything, that PX.
Did you get on with the American Marines?
Oh, yes. Well, yes, fairly good there, yeah. More so when we were in Korea.
What was it like for you to hear and see these commandos that have come back from a real hiding in Korea? I mean,
that's right. Well, we were the reinforcements, you see. We made up the people who were killed or wounded. And 25% of the casualties in Korea were frostbite. And a lot of that, they went home, of course, when they came back. They were sent home.
Did you see some of the commandos that had come back from?
Oh yes, well, we were all stationed together in these Australian barracks in Curie.
And what do you remember having conversations? I mean, what do you remember thinking? Because you've gone in as a sort of super fit commando, and then you're meeting commandos that have taken a hammering,
yeah,
who are frostbitten and in a terrible state. and have lost friends. Was there a change in the morale? Can you remember?
No, not a lot. No, no. But the Marines don't get disheartened.
Yeah.
No, that was all right. We had went on leave a couple of times in Curie, you know, and enjoyed ourselves. But then we were sent up. Well, my B troop were sent up to Wonsan Harbour, and we were on Yodo Island.
Okay, so yeah, you were talking about the islands.
Yes.
So, actually, before we get there, what was Drysdale like?
Excellent.
Had you met him at this point?
Yes, yes. And Major Aldrich, of course, he was a major figure in Korea. Major Aldrich. And, well, the whole unit was very family, you know. Well, the Marines were always a family, and but the 4-1 Commando was especially so. You know, you made friends and you were friends for life, but that didn't work out because you were posted away from people later on, weren't you?
Yeah.
You make friends with somebody in the Marines and then you get posted or they got posted, you know. So you lose your friends, but you always make new ones.
Yeah. When you any memories of Drysdale where you met him or he spoke to you or anything that stood out with him?
No, not really. No, I never actually spoke to him. He addressed us, you know, because in Japan we were all stationed in a cinema, and all the camp beds next to each other in this cinema. That was our accommodation for a couple of months. He came and spoke to us there, you know, apologised for the accommodation.
And what about Aldridge?
Well, he was a. I got pictures of him there, but the Americans, they awarded 4-1 Commando citation, didn't they?
Mm.
The Americans. They thought the world of us. Our berries, they offered us $50 for a berry, a green berry. Drysdale said, if anybody sells their berry, they're for it, he said. Yeah, we became attached to the Marines, especially in Wonsan on the islands, you know.
Yeah.
Because one of our jobs on the islands was to protect the American shore fire control team. They were on the island and they had their own compound. And they used to spot targets in Wonsan itself, trains, convoys, anything that moved. They would call up one of the US ships in Wonsan Harbour. There was two that used to come up, the Toledo, USS Toledo, and the US St. Paul. They used to take turns and come to the harbour. And the shore fire control teams would get onto the ships, get the guns firing at these targets. But they were so slow manning the guns, the target is gone. The only difference was HMS Belfast came up. And when they told the Belfast the target, they were there in 5 minutes firing. The Americans couldn't believe it, how quick they were. They invited the watches, starboard and port watch, alternately, aboard to have a good meal, a drink in the naffy, and a good watch a film show and everything, you know. And they sent us back with fruit and vegetables, fresh stuff. And then I was in the starboard watch and the port watch went first. And a couple of days later, we were going to go starboard on board the Belfast to be given a knees up sort of thing, you know. But she sailed before I got on board. She went up there very long. But of course, being the Marines on Tato Island, we had to have a parade ground. So the parade ground got levelled, the trees knocked down. And we had a proper parade ground. We used to parade every morning on this.
When you say what was your role as a defence? You were defence for the watch.
The island, to stop them invading the island and getting rid of the Americans, you see, because they were a thorn in the side, really.
And how many Marines were on the island?
About 200, I suppose. I was in the heavy weapons section, and we had mortar pits dug, and we zeroed our mortars onto the beaches. So all we had to do was put the shell down, and it would land on the beach automatically. We were already zeroed in, and we had machine gun posts all around the island, all zeroed in, watching the beaches. They did try to invade the island once, but they were picked up on the American radar, the ship's radar. They picked them up, and they didn't even reach the shore. We didn't want them to get ashore because there were Gooks and Chinese, and they all look alike, don't they? And we had Gooks on the island already, the fishermen. But they never got ashore. The only time they did get ashore was on the island of Modo. We had four Marines on Modo, and the rest were rocks, which is
the Korean Marines.
Korean Marines. There's only 4 Royals on there, and they were invaded, and the rocks didn't want to know. So our 4 guys had to set fire to the hut they were in, and they hacked their way out the back of the hut. It was only a mud hut, and got to the top of the hill. And the top of the hill was one of these big cannon machine guns, which they used to have on the flying fortresses up there. So they went out there to man that, and the Gooks didn't come after them. They retreated back because the Marines on the other islands were sending landing craft over to retake the island. So they disappeared.
You didn't go on one of those landing craft?
Oh yes. Not from the ships. When we did the raids, we went USS Montrose, big landing craft ship. They had all the landing craft in the hull.
Oh yeah, no, but I'm on about you personally. You didn't go to the other island when the...
No, I didn't go. No, because I was on heavy weapons. They didn't want mortars, machine guns. We were there for the defence of the island. And we had a assault engineer named Corporal Brady. Oh, he was a comic of the unit, you know. He was brilliant, he was. He used to tie up a tin of bully beef and trail along behind him. That was his pet dog. And he used to talk to it, you know. He was a real comic. He was the life and soul of the party, Corporal Brady. And the American compound, they put up a Union Jack in their compound. And Corporal Brady was incensed with that. He was an assault engineer. He went out and cut down a huge tree, took it up to the top of this highest hill in Tado. He got a Union Jack off the Belfast, and he put this huge Union Jack up on the island. You could see it for miles. The Americans took theirs down like.
Brilliant.
And we were often shelled from the mainland, you know. But there were some buildings on Tado, and they were a leper colony. Well, we got the leper colony evacuated back to the mainland.
Did you see them?
Yes, yeah, terrible. We were all frightened to death of catching it, but they said you can't catch leprosy. It's not, it's not
contagious.
Contagious. That's the word I was looking for. Well done.
What were we talking about then? You were talking about you being shelled a few times.
Yes, but the trouble is when they shelled us, you see, we could pinpoint their guns, and the US ships used to fire back, so they didn't shoot at us very often. The only time they did have a go at us when it was American Independence Day, and the Americans on the island, they wanted to celebrate, and they wanted to show a film. They put a screen up on the parade ground, and they were showing a film. I don't forget it was. We were all watching this film, you know. And of course, the screen all lit up, big bright light. They started shelling us. We all got in our trenches. We were still watching the film. Explosions going around.
Really? Yeah, that's classic. David, tell me a bit about some of the raids you did.
Well, the main one I went on was when we blew up this railway line. Well, the assault engineers blew it up. We were on the Bigorre when we went to the Montrose, got in the landing craft. I got photographs of me getting into the landing craft. And we went ashore, it was quite foggy, and there was no opposition there. They were actually waiting for us further up the coast. They thought we were going to land about 5 miles up the coast, but we went to Saint-Jean, and the railway line there going into a tunnel. And there was no opposition of such. And the assault engineers got pictures there blowing the railway line up. And that was put out of commission for a couple of months, I think. And then we came back.
What's your role? Just describe what you do on those assault landings.
Well, we go ashore on the landing craft, then spread out in the perimeter to protect the engineers whilst they were doing their job. So just our job was to protect the engineers in case the North Koreans attacked us.
Were you on the mortar there, or were you?
No, I didn't have any mortars, no. With mortars, you've got to zero in and things like that, No, we had machine guns and light machine guns, the A4 light machine guns, but that was all we had. But they came back, but we'd gone by the time they got back to us.
Should have done this in the first place. Actually looks a bit better, but anyway, never mind.
Is that better?
Yeah, it's good. Sorry, you were telling me about that. So when you say there was no opposition, did you see anybody? Did you meet any?
Oh yeah, it's a village there, and there's a few Americans with us, and I don't know why, but they shot the head man of the village. I don't know why. We're a bit annoyed about that.
The Americans did?
The Americans shot the head man when we left. There's only a small village, and we evacuated it before we blew up the railway line.
Trigger happy, aren't you, the Americans?
Oh yeah, definitely.
What do you do about dogs if you're on a raiding party with dogs? Do you just have to shoot the dog if you get a dog barking at you, or just leave it?
No, we never had that problem. No problems with dogs.
Okay, that was one raid. Did you do any others?
Yes, we went on one, and the intention was to go ashore and ambush a patrol and bring them back as prisoners back. So we went on the landing craft so far, and then we had to transfer into rubber dinghies because of the noise, and we were paddling ashore. But ahead of us had gone a lieutenant and a sergeant, Haywood. No, I got it all in there. They went in the canoe to reconnoitre the beach for us. In fact, 2 canoes went. And we heard firing, and the lieutenant and the sergeant were killed. So they obviously knew we were coming, or they heard us coming. And Captain Stoddart, who was a gung-ho type of officer, he still wanted to go ahead on this raid and capture these prisoners. But he was overruled. We had to withdraw, which I was very pleased about, because I was in a rubber dinghy with a radio on my back. And I thought, if I go in the Ogden, I'm going to go straight to the bottom. So I was quite pleased when he abandoned that.
When a decision's made to not go, when you say it was overruled, who overruled him? What, the rest of you?
Probably Major Aldrich overruled it. He wasn't there, but he was on the radio. Captain Stoddart was the captain in charge of the raiding party, because he wanted to go ahead, gung-ho type he was. Anyway...
How was morale? I mean, that's the first time you've been out on a raid and actually lost somebody. How did you feel? What was it like? Did you know these guys?
Well, it's just one of those things, The morale, well, obviously upset the loose comrades, but that's what we're there for, really. Not to get killed, but when I went on raids, I almost wrote a letter to my mother to be posted if I didn't come back, And we had, the assault engineers had built a toilet, and they put this toilet right on top of this hill. And you had to sit up there on this toilet, all open, to do your business. And when we were told we were going on a raid, there used to be a queue to get on the toilet.
Yeah. Nervous poo.
Yeah. But most of the raids after that were small affairs, and they were mostly done to occupy the troops. You know, they had to keep troops there to resist our invasions, as they say. But what else is up? Well, what else happened? Oh, we had a flying fortress crashed just off the island, and the crew were saved. And the landing craft went out and picked most of them up. They managed to get out the aircraft. And in the rubber dinghies on board these aircraft, there's $1,000 in gold, which the crew could use if they were captured. The crew could use to bribe. But that went missing. We don't know if the American crew had it or any of our chaps got it. It was never found.
$1,000
in the dinghies, you know.
in those days.
Yeah.
Huge money.
Another thing, we lost 4 guys. They were on the island of Modo, the smallest island, the one nearest to the coast. Well, you could on Yodo, you could see their guys walking along the cliffs, you know, with binoculars. But on Modo, we had a rough weather, and we had a landing craft on the beach at Modo, and it got a bit rough on that side of the island, so 4 guys went round. One only had his bathing trunks on, went round to move it to the lee side of the island, away from the rough water. And they set off, and the engine broke down. And they had no radio, which was really against the rules, you know. Anyway, they got washed. They got washed ashore on the mainland and were taken prisoner. And the fishermen told us afterwards, the Korean fishermen came back and said they were paraded through Wonsan with their green berries on top of poles, you know. I think one of them died in captivity, one of them. He was a Scotsman. The Scotsman used to get on the radio at Wonsan to the ships because the North Koreans couldn't understand him. So they used him to pass messages, the Scottish accent.
Brilliant.
But he was one of the ones who got lost. So that was 4. We lost 4 there. Then the peace talks started, and they didn't see a need for us to be on those islands anymore. So we were sent back to Japan. But I had leave. When I was on the islands, you had R&R leave. I was sent back to Japan for a week to the Yamanaka Hotel, which was just outside Tokyo. And you could go horse riding, all the comforts of home there, you know, good nice food and everything. Bit of snooker, table tennis, skiing, you could go skiing.
Wow.
And before we went to Korea, we went to a training camp at the foot of Mount Fuji. And we did some training there at a camp called Camp McGill. And it was a training camp, basically.
Yeah.
And we wanted to climb Mount Fuji. Not cliff climbing, because there was a path going up, actually. But the Japanese wouldn't let us go up, because it was a sacred island. And they didn't want British troops tramping up there.
Oh, that's a shame. It's a beautiful, beautiful mountain, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, I got lots of pictures of it there, yeah. Yeah, so, and we had some good runs in Tokyo. Really enjoyed that. And we were on leave.
Yeah.
Of course, Japan was American-occupied Japan then. It was still occupied by the Americans.
Did you go to Hiroshima?
No, didn't go there. No, only Tokyo and Yokohama. Went to Yokohama. And Sasebo, of course, we finished up in Sasebo. It was a Japanese flying boat harbour, for the flying blues. And we was living in tents on there. And I made some friends with Japanese there. My laundryman was a Japanese and used to do my laundry for me. And he invited me to his house one day to meet his family. And we went and sat on the floor on the mats and had a meal, you know, with chopsticks.
Yeah.
But
What were the Korean? Did you meet any of the Korean rock? I know you weren't with them, but did you meet any of them?
no, only the yes, Corporal. I got a picture of him. Corporal Kim. He was a nice guy. We got on well with him. He could speak English, so we got on all right with him. But we didn't have many rocket marines with us. They weren't very reliable. They changed sides, you know.
Yeah.
So like they did on Modo. They didn't want to know when the North Koreans had landed.
And what about the Koreans the fishermen on your island? And what were they like? Did you?
Oh, they were okay. Yeah, they used to change their flag. They had one flag up when they left us, and they changed it halfway across and put the North Korean flag up and go over, land their fish in one sand, you know, over there. No, we have gone all right with them.
Wow.
And the children and everything, you know, the Korean children, we played with them and made friends with them. We got on all right with the locals on Tato.
Yeah. So when you knew the peace talks were on, how much, you know, did you expect to move on? What was the sort of feeling like? Were you restless as well?
Well, the talks were on. We were hoping that the war would end, you know, which it did eventually. But the talks went on for ages, didn't they? And they didn't want the Marines raiding Korea when the talks were on. So they decided to send us back to Japan.
And then from Japan, where did you go next?
They came home then, after a while, on the Empire Faui. That was a troop ship, of course. And we arrived in Plymouth. I got the dates down there, 23rd January, I think it was. When we got to Southampton, my parents had come down to meet the ship. And I was on the front page of all the national newspapers.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
There was my mother and grandmother greeting me at Southampton. Actually, it wasn't annoying to us, but when we got to Southampton, full of troops, of course, coming back from Korea, the Gloucesters and everything. But they allowed because all the press were there, the Marine Band was there, and all our parents and girlfriends and wives were there. They let the Marines go ashore to greet them all. Photographs, TV, everything. It was all filmed. And the rest of the troops on the ship were furious because we'd been allowed ashore to meet our families, and they had to stay on board till the next day. So it didn't go down very well with them because they'd done just as much in Korea as we had, you know, the Gloucesters and things like that. Yeah. Anyway, we had to go back on board then, and then we came off the next day.
How long do you get back in Blighty before you're off on your next assignment then? You may as well finish your time as a Marine for me.
Yes, well, I had 2 weeks leave, of course, eventually, and we were allowed to march through Plymouth with fixed bayonets when we came to Plymouth, but the commandos, and the Lord Mayor gave us a teddy oggy each. You know what teddy oggy? Cornish pasty. We were given one each. And we marched down Armada Way with fixed bayonets and everything. You know. But anyway, when all that was over, I went on leave for a couple of weeks. Then I went back to Plymouth. And then I had to do sea time then, because per mare per term, by land, by sea, by sea, by land. So I had to go on the ships then, and I had to go on HMS Devonshire, county class cruiser, and it was a cadet training ship. The cadets came on board from the Britannia at Dartmouth.
Yeah.
Dartmouth College. They had to do sea time. So they came on board the Devonshire. And wasn't many Marines. We were on there for security, basically. There weren't many Marines on there because the guns weren't manned or anything like that.
Did you have your own mess deck?
Oh yes, midships. Always amidships of Marines. That's going back through history, as you know. We were there to protect the officers from the crew. But yeah, so we had 3 cruises that year on the Devonshire. We went to the Caribbean for 3 months, came back for Easter leave. Then we went to the Mediterranean for 3 months, came back for autumn leave. Then we went up north to Scotland and Norway for 3 months. And that was wonderful. You know, and you always came home for leave after 3 months. And the cadets got changed over, you know. They had to go on the ship to get sea time, the cadets.
How does a Marine stay? I'm just thinking about how much training you went through to become a Marine. And then you're on a ship for 9 months of the year. How do you keep up your fitness to a really...
Well, when I was training, I had a month in Portsmouth to do gunnery at the Royal Gunnery School. And we had to learn naval gunnery, not that we ever used it, but we had to learn that. And we had to go on board a ship, training ship in Portsmouth Harbour to learn how to live on a ship. So we had to do that for 2 weeks. So that was all included in the training, initial training. But on board the ship on the Devonshire, when we got to the West Indies, we stopped at a place called Beef Island, and the Marines had to go ashore and do a dummy raid and things like that, you know, to keep us on the ball. And we also spent the night ashore once, looking after ourselves. But then after the Devonshire got broken up, jobs we did on the ship were security, like corporal the gangway, bridge sentry, looking after the captain, keyboard, looking after the keyboards, looking after the weapons. That was our job. There weren't many of us on there, but it was a good life, that was. But then she was decommissioned and we were transferred to the Triumph light fleet carrier. And she did the same thing. 3 months the Caribbean. Whilst we were in the Caribbean, we went to Barbados and we saw a test match between England and the West Indies. Len Hutton, Godfrey Evans, Dennis Compton, Tom Graveney, the wicket-keeper, that was Evans, wasn't it? Yeah. And we were allowed ashore to watch that match. Wonderful. I got pictures of it there, all the players.
Lovely.
And then came back, leave, Mediterranean for 3 months. Came back and up north again to Kristiansand. And we did a cruise all down Flam, down the fjord. Wonderful that was. Beautiful trip. And when you got to Flam, all the village invited us ashore for a knees up, you know, drinks. It was wonderful. That was the best times. You get good times and bad times, don't you? Yeah. In 7 years. But those 2 cruises I had were wonderful. Well, then I finished my sea time, so I had to go back into commandos again. So I joined 4-5 Commando, and we were sent to Malta, a place called Haida Fia in St. Paul's Bay. And I was Corporal Storeman. I used to look after the weapons and the stores and issue them when they were needed, you know. I had my own little, I had to sleep in the stores, so I had my own little cubby hole there. It was very nice. All to myself.
Yeah, lovely.
And then we spent time in, quite enjoyed it in Malta. And then...
Did you do any of the cliff climbing in Malta?
No, but we do. I got a picture of me there climbing a cliff frightened to death. One of my favourites. I'm not very good for heights, and cliff climbing one of my favourite occupations. But you all had to do it, you know. And some of the Marines, they decided to be cliff leaders, you know, and they go up first with the rope, and the rest would follow. But that wasn't for me.
Yeah. You'll follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did a lot of that in Plymouth in our training, you know, and Bickley. So anyway, we were in Malta enjoying ourselves, and then we were sent to Cyprus. So I spent the rest of my time in Cyprus chasing Macarius and Grievous, the guerrilla leader. And once again, I was in charge of the stores, and we went to Troodos Islands. Troodos Mountains. Yeah, Mount Olympus. We were stationed up there. And we used to go on raids, 4 o'clock in the morning, raiding villages. And going through the mountains, the worst position was to be the Bren gunner. We had a Bren gun on top of the driver cab, and you had to man that going down through the hills. And if you were ambushed, the first one who got it was the Bren gunner and the driver. So none of us fancied going up there on these raids. So we did that quite a few times.
Did you eat hedgehog?
Hedgehog?
Did you eat hedgehog while you were there?
No.
Oh, because the Cypriots love hedgehog, apparently.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
No, didn't have that problem. Cypriot whiskey, we used to make get Cypriot whiskey, mountain whiskey. We used to run our Bunsen burners on that.
Really, how funny.
We had a couple of were killed on these ambushes. Of course, the worst place to be was in Nicosia, because we went ashore in Nicosia. The gooks, the terrorists, used to throw hand grenades in the cafes and bars, you know, and blow up the troops. But we weren't in Nicosia very often. We were up in the Troodos Mountains most of the time. A place called Platras. Platras, the Hotel Splendid, was our headquarters. But we went further up, 6,000 feet up at the top of the Troodos Mountains. And we did ski patrols up there sometimes. But didn't have too many casualties over there.
Can I ask, how often did you use your rifle in anger, if at all?
Well, I used the mortar machine gun mostly. I didn't use my rifle very much. Even on the islands, you know, it was mortars and machine guns we used. The Garand rifle was a good rifle, that was, the American one.
So did you go back to the 303 when you came back to...
Yes, when we came back to
to the ships?
Cyprus, well, Cyprus, yeah. These were 303s then. They didn't have these AK machine guns they got now.
Yeah.
AK rifles.
It's still, the 303 was the First World War rifle, and you're still using it in the 50s.
Yes, that's right.
Terrible.
Yes. It was reliable, but...
what did you think of the Cypriot terrorists?
Well, not very much, actually. I got things in there asking us to surrender and things like that, you know. Leaflets they used to throw around at us, you know, why are we fighting? And all that. You're getting killed for the British government, all this business, you know.
Did you get Korean propaganda on the islands?
No.
So obviously
nothing
on the mainland they leave, you know, propaganda on the...
Oh yes, well, the prisoners, as you know.
Yeah, and they got it as well, yeah.
They got programmed, the communists and things like that. But in Korea, our biggest enemy was the Chinese, really. There's lots of North Koreans, but the Chinese, there's thousands of them, you know, in that Chosin, they used to machine gun them and kill. They used to yell and blow trumpets and charge, you know. They weren't worried about casualties.
Yeah.
They used to overrun the American positions and our positions. So the numbers.
That obviously you didn't really come into contact with the Chinese and the Koreans when you were in Korea as an opposition, but yet in Cyprus,
only when we raided, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in Cyprus, you're actually confronting
Oh, yes.
a nasty enemy.
Terrorists, yes.
Yeah.
And you couldn't distinguish. They weren't in uniform, you know. It'd just be a guy walking by, and he'd turn around and shoot you, you know. In Nicosia, places like that.
Did you use your mortar in Cyprus?
No. We just would raid the villages and try and capture the terrorists and things like that. But no, nor a machine, only a brain gun, the only thing we used, heavy weapons. No mortars and machine guns. We didn't. We fighting terrorists, you know. It's not like an enemy in front of you. You didn't know who the enemy was. Anyway, at the end of my career, we were chasing General Grivas over the Troodos Mountains. And to cover his tracks, he set fire to the forest. Of course, we spent the next time trying to put out these forest fires. We had to give up chasing him. And we were slaving away up the mountains. And a jeep pulled up, the lieutenant in this jeep. And he said, "Marine Carpenter," he yelled. I said, "That's me." He said, "Get in the jeep. Your 7 years is up. You've got to go back to UK." And I had to get in the jeep, go back to camp, get all my gear, went down to the airport, and I flew home in a Hermes aircraft back to England, just like that, next day. And I left all my mates and friends. I never had a chance to say goodbye or anything. Yeah, I just taken out forest firefighting. He said, "Come on, your 7 years is up."
You didn't get the opportunity to stay on then?
No. Well, I could have done. I was in 5 years reserve as well, you see. I spent 5 years as a reservist. But I didn't want to stay on, really. So I came home.
And how did you find that adapting to like normal life after 7 years of a really remarkably amazing career where you've been all over the place?
All over the world, yeah, that's true. Well, took some getting used to. But so when I went back to Livingston, the Suez crisis happened, and all the camp went to Suez. And I had to stay behind the camp to man it, to look after it with a few others, you know. So I stayed on a couple of more months before I was, then they all came back from Suez, then I was released. I could go home again. And I got a job at BAC, the metallurgist.
And did you ever have any sort of, you know, issues with being a Marine afterwards, or?
No.
Do you miss it?
Well, I did at the time, yes. Well, I did miss it. Because working for the BAC, I was working indoors, and I couldn't get used to that. Been out 7 years, I've been outside, you know, all over the world and gradually working. So anyway, after 2 years, I packed it in. And I went to work for my brother. He was Ball's Ice Cream Depot manager in Thundersley in Essex. And in the summer, he wanted extra staff. So I went down and worked for him, lived with him, and drove up and down Southend seafront selling Ball's ice cream.
Oh, wow. Well,
That's how I started my sales career. I was in selling then all the time. I finished up working for Kraft Foods, and I finished up aerial sales manager for Kraft after a long selling career with different companies.
yeah.